You're listening to the Baumbastic Podcast with Andrew Ellis on Inside Arkansas.
Well, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Baumbastic Podcast presented by Inside Arkansas and hosted by Andrew Ellis. Today's show, as always, brought to you by Roback Apparel. Go to roback.com, use the promo code HOGSBY20, 20% off your first purchase. We've got a great episode of the Baumbastic Podcast for you today. We're going to talk a little bit about this past weekend's scrimmages and just some overall storylines coming out of fall ball. And I thought, who better to talk to than a man who knows ball, a man who's seen more, a little bit more of fall ball than I have. I was not able to be out there this past weekend, so he's got a different perspective, and he, just comes with his own set of skills. Anyway, he's our most esteemed, our most recurring, and our most favorite guest on the Baumbastic Podcast. He's Daniel Shi. How are we doing?
We're doing well. I think I definitely hold the record for most recurring. Favorite, though.
That's undisputed.
Might be up for the commenters to decide after the episode.
I tell you, listen, I don't know how official this is, but I haven't heard more like claims for other people. People have enjoyed other episodes, but I've heard from at least more than two people that they love Daniel Shi on the pod. So I'm going to take their word for it. That's
two more people than I would have thought, but okay.
Hey, listen, you've met at least one of these people too.
Yep,
you know this is a real thing. But anyways, Daniel, so fall ball, and we're just going to jump right into it because we're not to break the fourth wall here. We're on a little bit of a time crunch today, but I want to get right into it because I feel like last fall when we were having these same conversations that we're having now, and preparing for the season and kind of assessing what we're going to see from the Arkansas Razorbacks on the baseball field, we were very confident in the pitching staff, just based on what they had done the year before, the success under Matt Hobbs, the guys they had brought in. We didn't really have a question of, was Zach Root going to be good? Was Landon Shi going to be good? We didn't have a conversation about Gabe Yackel, whether he was going to be good. And Gage Wood, by this point, it was very clear he was on track, not to throw a no-hitter in the College World Series, but he was on an upward trajectory. And we had a lot of questions about the offense of, hey, are they ever really going to compete with the top of the league in terms of firepower? Are they going to have a lineup 1 through 9 that's dangerous? I feel like this year it's kind of funny that the offense gets all the benefit of the doubt here. We kind of know what Arkansas has in terms of some key spots and what their returning production is and what that could look like. And they're coming off such a good year. I feel like when people got through the portal and got through draft, there were a lot of questions with the pitching staff. Going into the fall and going into some of these scrimmages, was that sort of how you viewed the team, where you were maybe a little bit more confident in what they had at the plate, but had more questions about what they were going to do on the mound?
Yeah, I think so. Because, you really didn't have a clear – like a lot of these guys that they brought in could be like hybrid. We'll figure out their roles as they kind of go along. Where last year, it really wasn't the case. They brought in Zach Root. He had already had starting experience. Shi had already had starting experience. They really didn't expect to get both. This is something that Dave said many times. They ended up getting both. Shi ended up being the fourth starter, if that's even a thing in college baseball. Wood goes down. You slide him right in. He starts on Sunday every week until Gage gets back. It was pretty cut and dry. This year, kind of the opposite. Like, you could kind of piece together. There are obviously always going to be position battles as to who ends up where, but you kind of knew that like these are your main infielder, outfielder kind of position groups that they pulled out of the portal. And the pitching staff was just kind of like, okay, well, they've got to replace this entire staff again. And there weren't really three internal options going into before the portal anyway that you makes sense, that if everything else went wrong, if they get nobody, which again, like, people have to understand that, like, when the portal season starts, you're not guaranteed anybody. You're not like looking, and they certainly did miss out on a few top arms, which I'm sure you've covered in depth. So
I've certainly been yelled at a few times about that. Yes, I have. No, that's a great point, that in terms of just roles, we really didn't have that many conversations last year. It wasn't like who's going to be the Sunday, who's going to be the Saturday. Like, you could argue the order, and maybe you could have that conversation with Wood, but there really weren't a ton of arguments of like who is going to step into big roles. Hell, even with the closing situation, like, you knew Christian Fouch was going to have a pretty good, case to be made there, and like you had some veterans like Will McIntyre, so it's like there really weren't too many key spots up for grabs. And I think that's the thing that's so interesting is you go into the postseason, you really start leaning on about 6 to 8 arms for the most part. And right now, of course, we're very far away from June 2026, but it's like I don't feel confident in predicting who those 6 to 8 arms would be and what that role would look like. And so I want to ask you about the starting rotation, although we have to start with the caveat of we have not seen any of these guys in a starting role for the most part. You start a scrimmage and then you throw 34 pitches and then you're done or whatever. And some of these guys don't even go past an inning. So it's we don't have a huge sample size and there's not much to really go off of here. But of the guys outside of Gackle, who by the way we're not going to see all fall, Parker Coyle, Cole Gibbler, Hunter Dietz has been in this mix a little bit. You've got also, Colin Fisher, I believe he's been starting games. They've thrown some freshmen in there. You've had some transfers, McIlvain, Kersher. They're kind of just giving a bunch of guys these opportunities. For you personally, has there been anybody coming out of the first 2 weeks of fall that you're like, oh, wow, he's a much more serious candidate to start on the weekend than I maybe realized? Or has it gone about how you expected with some of those guys like Coyle and Gibbler kind of being the ones you would expect?
I think Coyle and Gibbler, I think one of the two of them is definitely going to start. I would lean towards Gibbler at the minute just because this has kind of just been the natural progression that they've done with other players. I don't think they certainly weren't counting on Parker Coyle to be back. But he is now, and he probably could end up being another option. But to me, it just feels like for Gibbler's development, and if they're really going to try and work on a third pitch with him, it really is to start. And then for me, I think especially Kircher, the way his fastball carries and the way, he just kind of, I think we saw some of the velo at the end where we saw the tick up at Oklahoma, but to see it in person, I think one of McIlvain or Kircher would be, I don't know if new is the right word because both of them were there. Basically, they're two big portal arms this oh God, drawing a blank. This portal cycle, but
was cycle the word you were looking for there?
Yes, that was. Oh gosh. And then to your point, they are Dave has literally changed the scrimmage format. I don't think he's never done this, right? It's certainly
not that I can remember.
And so he's basically he's splitting the scrimmages in half to make up new starting positions. That's kind of where he's at right now, which is, you can look at it as a good thing or a bad thing, but even James DeCramer, I think, has gotten a few starts on some days, and he certainly could be kind of a dark horse option.
It is crazy how many of those guys, and I know it sounds weird to say that, hey, there's such a question mark here. I really don't even necessarily view it as a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing because a lot of these guys are intriguing, have the stuff to do it, have the makeup to do it, and you're kind of like, okay, I could see that. Ethan McIlvain really struggled in a starting role at Vandy, but would that be the worst case scenario where it's all right, you've got this guy that a lefty that's been up to 98, former top 100 recruit, a guy that could be a third, fourth round type of prospect. He's already got a ton of that draft buzz. He's going to end up being your Sunday starter. I think we could probably talk ourselves into that or something like that. Kersher, I'm glad you mentioned him, who, by the way, friend of the program, has looked really impressive this fall by all accounts. And I'm excited to see that. I never really considered him as a starter type of guy, at least when they first picked him up in the portal. He threw 12 innings at Oklahoma. I felt like it was I view him in that kind of Christian Fauch late inning type of role. And so now that I think he mentioned possibly being a starter on the show, and I kind of was like, okay, whatever. And then Dave mentioned it the other day, was like, yeah, if he gets that third pitch, we could start him. And I'm like, whoa, all right. And then you see him pitch and you kind of see the vision. It is going to be very interesting to see how they start assessing these roles. One of these guys, though, Daniel, that we just have to talk about, and honestly, not even really in a starting context, because again, we just don't have enough to really go off of here. But if you were just watching these scrimmages and had no context, and you woke up from a coma of 2020, you'd be like, oh, so Hunter Dietz is the Friday night starter here, right? He's looked the best in these scrimmages. This is the version of Hunter Dietz we've always kind of wanted to see. Are you completely dismissing this, Daniel? Because by the way, there are some Razorback fans who are just openly I don't care what he does in the scrimmages. Like you can't count on it. It's not going to happen in the season. Or are you on the side of overreacting to, hey, this guy's going to be a stud, or do you fall in the middle, which is a whole lot of room?
Well, falling in the middle is a lame answer. So I'll say I'm closer to the end of overreacting, and he's a stud. That's
a great answer, by the way.
I've been pitching. I think I said last year around this time that, like, if I had to pick one guy on last year's roster that I'm like rooting for from a human interest perspective, it would have been Hunter Dietz, and it hasn't changed. And I guess for the people who like have kind of, I don't know, given up on him, it's like, what else do you want him? Like, what else could he have done in the past 2.5 years differently? You know, it's like his arm fell off, which happens to like all pitchers nowadays that throw 97 or 98 at some point, whether it be before they get to college, like you have high schoolers getting Tommy John now, or as soon as they get into pro ball and into the big leagues. And, you know, he's had arm issues, and then I really think he was there. And then if you remember, the mount flew off the wall, and then which is just like, you know, Murphy's Law or whatever. So, you know, he's bound for some good fortune.
Yeah, and again, like it doesn't even really have to be he has to live up to all the expectations that he had coming out of high school when he was rated higher than Gabe Gackle. There's a lot of room there. Like, if he ends up being a really good setup guy, that would be he would get drafted and make a lot of money. Like, that would be an awesome way for this story to end. And I think it's a lot more in play than people maybe realize. Moving over to the position player side of things, I think, again, there's a lot of benefit of the doubt that you can give to really all these pieces on this roster, whether it's Kojal, Aloy, Helfrich, guys that are coming back that produced a lot for you, or someone like TJ Pompey, who has shown a lot of promise in his career and seems to be on an upward trajectory. Ruiz is coming off a really awesome year. Has there been any transfer specifically? Because I feel like last year Davalon was your guy that, like, you just right away gravitated to. You knew he was a stud. You liked the way he played. Has there been anyone that has caught you in that way where you're just like, oh, man, this is my guy right here? Or are you still just kind of feeling out some of these dudes?
I'm still kind of in the feeling out process, but I think Micah New is kind of in maybe not a similar spot as Charles Davalon was last year, but like he's also like, people forget Charles Davalon, which I guess, oh Lord, I don't know how we got here, but, you know, he was a converted infielder, which I guess kind of reared its head at the ugliest time possible. But, you know, it's Micah New, converted infielder, moving to the outfield for the first time. And he's, you know, I don't know if he's as much of a contact guy as Davalon. I don't know if Arkansas will have another hitter like that for the next, I don't know, 5 years, to be honest. But he kind of fits the same, has a few parallels at least anyway. And so,
yeah, he's also interesting because when he committed to Arkansas, and like I remember Joe Doyle and a few other draft guys tweeting about it and being like, yo, this is more notable than I think people realize, because he wasn't ranked super high as a transfer. But Doyle talked about, he's just like, man, it's speed and power are both like plus traits for him. And so everything else can kind of just be built around that. And to the point you mentioned, he's not quite the contact hitter of Davalon, certainly going to strike out his fair share. And Arkansas's had plenty of guys like that are more boomer bust, that more toolsy, that maybe are not as consistent. But throughout the fall, he hasn't shown off a ton of the power, but he has gotten on base a ton. He has gotten on base. He steals bases at a very high rate. Like, and by the way, we're not falling for the trap of saying Arkansas is going to be a stolen base oriented team. That is not true, but they do have specific guys. Nolan Souza, by the way, had he stayed healthy and stayed in the lineup, he is that kind of guy who anytime he's on first base, you got to kind of watch for him. Micah New seems to be that. You know, he didn't hit many singles in the Cape this year, Daniel. No. He was a Cape League MVP. It was a lot of doubles and home runs and stolen bases. He barely hit singles. So the fact that he stole 14, 15 bags or whatever it was in the Cape is extremely notable because he was barely on first base. What does he have, like 4 stolen bases through 2 weeks here at Arkansas now? Like, he's one of those guys that I don't know if he's going to hit leadoff. Damian Ruiz probably does that, but Micah New is like, he's at the very least Justin Thomasy. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot. If he's not going to be Charles Davalon, there's at least something there. Like he just brings a spark to the lineup that I think is way more of a definitive thing for this team than maybe people realize when he committed, because he wasn't a super buzzworthy portal commitment, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and he was one of the rare ones, I think, in this day and age that didn't like announce it to the whole world 8 times that he had committed. So that was a bit of an odd little quirk there that was like literally, I think it was released by the Cape Twitter account, and we're all sitting there going,
it was whoever his team was in the Cape. I guess it was Falmouth. Their announcer was calling the game and was just like, and here's Micah New, he's committed to Arkansas. We were like, what?
Yeah.
No, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So, okay. And by the way, Damian Ruiz did not have a great weekend this past weekend. For whatever reason, just didn't have it this past weekend. He was unbelievable in the first weekend. I felt like he was on track to be like that guy that everyone fell in love with. Another one of the big transfers that I was very interested to get a look at was TJ Pompey, of course, the Texas Tech transfer, who really fits the profile physically of like he's 6'3", 6'4", 200 pounds, like looks like some of these big, strong guys. I mean, he looks similar to Vahiva Aloy out there at shortstop in terms of just body type. And he's got a lot of power. Like you see the tools. You see he's like a perfect Nate Thompson guy. He was built in a lab to be recruited by Nate Thompson. When he first committed, I thought he was a third baseman for sure. Dave has mentioned him playing shortstop. I know a lot of people have been intrigued by that possibility. I didn't know how much I bought it, and I'm not fully there where I'm like, hey, he's a starting shortstop. Let's put it in stone. But seeing him out there and seeing just the way that this coaching staff develops infielders, I am now much more on the side of him possibly starting at shortstop, and I think that's a real option for them. How do you assess that whole situation? Because you've got him, Nolan Souza, we aren't going to see this fall much of. Cam Kozel's been playing some third, playing some second. There's the Carson Brumball factor here. How do you assess just that whole kind of TJ Pompey situation? Because I think where you put TJ Pompey ultimately dictates where you put everyone else.
I think if Souza, it's just we don't know, right? Like we can speculate all day, but like until he throws, and even until he gets like some game action rep of like, okay, we got turn 6-4-3 double play. We got to like come in and pick it on the short hop and fling it over to first with the fast runner going down the line. But I think you put him at short, because I think the alternatives are a little bit like there are ways that you can talk yourselves out of some of the alternatives. Like you don't really think that you should put Kozel back at short because he hasn't played it since high school. You don't really want to, if you can, like put a true freshman at short, which they could very much end up doing with Carson Brumball, which I think
I was going to say, we agree that if they put a true freshman at shortstop,
it would be Carson Brumball. But it's like you also brought in this guy from the transfer portal with shortstop experience at a power 4 level. So it would behoove you just to throw him at third and then throw a freshman at short, So for now, I think assuming that Souza does not come back all on a linear progression, which in injuries almost never happens. Like any injury never comes back, just like every day continues to get better. I think Pompey is your 1A at short.
You know who we have not had to question is going to be in the lineup, Daniel? That's Reese Robinette, Big Country. Mm-hmm. First base. That dude's just a starting first baseman. Mm-hmm. Like, honestly, and by the way, he's swinging the bat really well. Looks great. He's been hitting like 2 in the lineup. Like, I don't know if he's going to hit second on the team, but it's like, I think it's pretty cool to see Dave and the staff view him that way. And he's earned that. You know what I mean? Like, he really has. He was awesome down the stretch, swinging the bat well this fall. I'm excited for him. I really do, and I don't know if I'm just crazy. Of course, Cam Kozel is a lock for the lineup as well. TJ Pompey's a lock for the lineup, but it's like it's cool to see Big Country's spot. Just we don't even have to have that conversation. And then I think Kozel, it's just a matter of, is he going to play second? Is he going to play third? I guess you could also maybe DH him if you really wanted to. I doubt they do that. And so I think that's, you're right that the Souza thing, we'll see what it looks like. I mean, he's a guy that's fully capable of hitting the ground running. We could be sitting here in January, February and be like, oh yeah, this guy's clearly in the lineup. He's clearly going to start at short or second or third, wherever. But I think it is going to be fascinating to see how this plays out. And Carson Brumball, for those that have not been paying attention, has just made this a discussion. And I want to give respect to a lot of Arkansas's position players because I've been very impressed with Alexander Peck. I think he's another guy. You want to talk about looking the part? He doesn't look like a 17, 18-year-old at all. Of course, Landon Schaefer's the highest-rated guy. He had a big hit last weekend as well. Even some of the guys that we maybe didn't expect. Caden Mitchell has had some good ABs. Luke Cornelison has been the two-way guy. Ty Briscoe.
Tyler Holland for a second straight fall.
Tyler Holland has been swinging the bat pretty well, too. It's kind of crazy. There's just a lot of depth of talent that they have on this roster. It's been really cool to watch some of these guys. But Carson Brumball, to me, has been the star, at least from the position player standpoint, although he is, of course, pitching. Now, Jordan Martin might be he's put together a nice little showing as well. But I feel like Brumball has been the big one, the big hit of fall camp so far. Are we calling it fall camp? No, it's just fall ball. And of course, another guest of the Baumbastic Podcast. So, man, whoever's booking this show, man, they're doing a great job. But what have your first impressions of Carson Brumball been like? Do you feel like you have to find a role for this guy no matter what? Do you think it's more likely to happen position player wise than pitcher?
I think they have to use him somewhat. And I think this is not necessarily a problem, but it just somehow, I don't know if it feels this way because they're just the guys that are out. But Kuhio's not playing right now. He hasn't played the first 2 weeks because of a hand injury that kind of lingered from, I don't know how much I 100% buy that it was just the home run derby, and it might have been an additional fatigue factor there because he's played a lot of baseball. But it's like the comfortability of Souza at short has kind of held up the entire infield, has put an asterisk on everything else. And then whether or not they feel comfortable putting Kuhio in the outfield is another huge asterisk, right? Because if the DH becomes a rotating spot where one day you can throw somebody in there who needs a day off in the infield and then throw Brumball at whatever position opens up, from that, and then put Brumball at DH for the whatever, and then maybe have him pick up a midweek inning. I don't know, but it feels like the two players that we're not able to see is kind of held up, is kind of holding up, putting asterisks by all the things that we're seeing in fall. But Brumball, definitely, if he loses the shortstop battle, he is definitely a leading candidate to at least force himself into the lineup at DH.
And of course, could also be the setup guy.
Yes.
What's funny is I really didn't even expect him to pitch. I remember when he said it, he was like, I still don't, we still haven't made a decision on what my position's going to be, what my role's going to be. And I kind of didn't even consider that he really could have a role on the pitching staff, but they seem to like him. I know he was really good in his first outing. They seem to like him on the mound as well. So that's going to be fascinating to see how that factors in. It's a lot harder to play the pitching game if the dudes you're starting shortstops. And I'm with you. Now, the Kuhio thing, I'm glad you brought that up, Daniel, because it leads me to my next point. With Kuhio Aloy, who, again, we have not seen, right now, I feel like, you correct me if you think I'm wrong here, I think the top four, because you're going to have four guys between 3 outfield spots and DH, Kuhio, whether he's at right field or DH, he's going to be in the lineup. I feel like if the season started right now, you'd be looking at an outfield of Ruiz, New, and you can left field, center field, whatever you want. Ruiz seems to be fine in center field, but I bet he starts in left field, New in center. I think Brenton Clark, if we were not saying if Kuhio Aloy is not starting in right field, I think it's Brenton Clark, personally. Obviously, I can see a case for Zach Stewart. Of course, Kuhio, if he winds up playing right field, cool. Do you agree with that assessment that if Kuhio Aloy is not starting in right field, Brenton Clark is the front runner there?
Ooh, we might have to split ways here, which isn't the worst thing in the world. But
so you go Stewart?
I think I'd go Stewart for now.
Gotcha. Experience, benefit of the doubt,
power, all that fun stuff. Just one last point on Carson Brumbaugh real quick. When he took the mound on Friday, like we had to like check our sheet like 5 times that he was actually on the mound. So like I don't think anybody really took this seriously unless you had an inside source that he was actually going to pitch. Like, but yeah, I think I'd go Stewart so far, just because I do think this lineup. I don't know. Clark probably does have power, but like this is going to be a much different team, and they're not going to be able to replace all 127 homers, something like that. But like, I think you definitely need another power bat. So for now, Stewart, obviously subject to change, long way to go.
Yeah, and I would also say that personally, like I do think Cahillo is going to wind up playing right field. Honestly, I think he's or at least for the they'll try and get him starts there. Will it be every day? Will it be 3 games each weekend? Maybe not, but I do think he's going to play plenty of time in right field. Which, to your point, I think frees you up to play this game at DH. Where today Nolan Souza's DHing. Today Cam Kojal's DHing and Souza's playing third. Or today Brumball's DHing. Today Britton Clark is DHing. You can kind of play that game a little bit with all these guys, and so I'm interested to see what they do for that as well. So Daniel, before I let you get out of here, and by the way, this is great stuff. I really appreciate you doing this. I know you're a very busy man, as you told me whenever I asked you to do this. You were like, I don't know if I can fit you into my schedule, but we'll see. But so I appreciate you doing this. But one thing I do, one thing I did want to touch on before I let you get out of here, though, of the returning pitchers, of which there are many, Parker Coyle, who has given up 2 home runs to Ryder Helfrich, which have made his numbers not look great. And I guess Gibbler maybe is in this category, but I'm really thinking of some of these guys that haven't had a huge role, like Colin Fisher or Tate McGuire. Of any of these returners, have any of them really upped their stock in your eyes as a guy? Because it was around this time last year that Parker Coyle really took that next step and became a guy that we knew was going to pitch a lot. Have any of these guys, do you see potential for that with any of these returning pitchers?
Couple of quick points. My schedule is busy, mostly just from me pretending to be productive. But as far as the pitching goes, I think for me personally, it's Tate McGuire, just because of the way that he's kind of been used the past couple of years, right? You've seen these people kind of take the stepping stone of, hey, I don't know if it was out of desperate need or out of something else, but he kind of took over that midweek role late last year, which again, not every fan is kind of tuned into when he's starting against UAPB in Little Rock or in North Little Rock, excuse me, in North Little Rock. But that certainly does, I think, count for something and kind of gives him a leg up in these kinds of things. It's like, hey, that was the previous step of your progression. Can he take the next step? And I think he's going to get a shot maybe to start in that similar role this year, I would guess, if you held a gun to my head right now, and kind of see where it goes from there.
Yeah, he's interesting. Early in last year, they gave him some big opportunities. Like I remember in Arlington, they brought him in. It was like 2-1 game, 2 outs, and they bring him in, and it didn't necessarily go well for him in some of those outings. I think there was another weekend game where they went to him in like a high leverage spot. And again, he had some pros of his sophomore year, some cons, but the fact that they were giving him those opportunities, I definitely think speaks to something. Of course, he didn't strike out a ton of guys, was very effective in the Cape all summer long. Like, was really good and got a lot of good experience there. And so I'm with you. I think he definitely, just from year 1 to year 2, he took a massive step forward. I think I can buy the case for him, and he's looked tremendous. He's looked as good as any of these returning guys. Well, Daniel, man, I really appreciate you for doing this, man. We effectively beat the clock, I feel like. Like, we're going to get out of here with plenty of time, and I really appreciate you doing this, man. And we're going to have to we'll get you back on after these epic bouts maybe with DBU and Little Rock. If Arkansas loses, come on here and be like, are we hitting the panic button? All that. Last question before you're fully dismissed. Right now, do you feel like this team is substantially worse than last year's team? Which, by the way, may be the best team we've ever seen at Arkansas. Do you feel like just gut feel, do you feel like they've taken a step back a little bit, or do you feel like it's about the same?
I mean, I think you have to say, oh God, this is going to feed into my running joke and reputation.
You hate
on
everybody,
this show.
yeah.
But I mean, you have to say yes, right? They're not going to hit 127 homers again. Like they're just not. I just like you can't seriously say, based on a few scrimmages, that these guys are going to hit 127 homers again. I mean, I just don't know how you could say that with a straight face. And there's certainly more questions with the pitching staff, as we alluded to. Not necessarily meaning that they're worse, but they really had 2.5 starters figured out by now, at least, which is rare. Again, it's rare. Like let's be clear about that. That last year was not the norm, and a little bit of regression to the mean is probably in order, at least to start the season.
I'm with you, and it's weird because sometimes you see teams overachieve and wind up being way better than what's on paper or whatever. And I would argue that last year's team also did that, where you went into the year and I don't know if we necessarily expected it to be as good as it was in some areas. I think this team has potential to be every bit as good, but I'm with you. I think there's actually more to figure out, and there's plenty of answers to these questions that I think Arkansas might have. But I think there's a little bit less you can just know for sure and rely on. So I'm actually inclined to agree, Daniel, but I do not think that disqualifies this Arkansas baseball team from winning the national title.
And with that, we bid you good night.
Hey, you like that? All right. Well, Daniel, for real, man, appreciate you doing this. He's Daniel Shi. You can find him on say the name of the site, because I know it changes and I get it wrong sometimes.
I think officially as of now, it's Razorbacks on Sports Illustrated. So there's that, and then
occasionally Best of Arkansas Sports.
What?
And still occasionally Best of Arkansas Sports.
Occasionally, more just baseball stuff, but I haven't written something for them in a hot minute.
Okay. Occasionally Best of Arkansas. Always Razorbacks on SI, and always in your hearts, number one. So he's Daniel Shi. I'm Andrew Ellis. It's been another brilliant edition of the Baumbastic Podcast. Appreciate you for listening. We'll be back soon.